Our lesson comes from John 20, 1 through 18. This is the story of Mary Magdalene at the tomb. Now, if you look at the four Gospels, you'll see this story being told in each one of them. But actually from different perspectives. Matthew, who was a follower of Christ and one of the disciples, but Matthew always taught or wrote from a Jewish standpoint, perspective. Then there was Luke, who was a physician, who recorded the events from others that had told him about them. And Mark, the young Mark, who was there in some respect, but it was John on this day that was present and recorded what he saw. So from that perspective, we want to talk about what John saw. A family was watching a movie of the life of Jesus on television. Their 6-year-old daughter was deeply moved as the movie maker realistically portrayed Jesus' crucifixion and death. Tears ran down the little girl's face as she took in Jesus on the cross, and that they laid him in a borrowed tomb. She watched as a guard was placed outside the tomb. And then suddenly, a big smile broke out on her face. She bounced on the arm of the chair and said with great anticipation, "Now comes the good part." Mm-hmm. That's why we're here today, is it not? Mm-hmm. To celebrate the good part of the last days of Jesus' pilgrimage on earth. To give thanks for Christ's victory over sin and death. To join our voices with millions of followers all around the world on this day to sing Jesus Christ is risen today. Before we go any further with today's lesson, let's look at what happened or occurred on Good Friday. Not just any Friday, but Good Friday. Why do we call it Good Friday? No one seems to know for sure why we call it Good Friday. That seems counterintuitive. It seems that it would be unbelievably terrible Friday. And possibly that would seem more appropriate. Our German friends call it Karfreitag. The Kar, K-A-R, is part is a obsolete word. It is the ancestor of the English word care. In a sense, cares and woes. It originally meant mourning, as in to mourn someone. So in German, it is Mourning Friday, not Good Friday. That could make more sense than Good Friday to some of us. That is certainly what Christ's disciples did on that Friday. They mourned. Some sources say that the original or the originality of the word good had a secondary meaning. It meant pass or holy. We could be celebrating on Friday, Holy Friday, if our language had evolved accordingly. Certainly that makes sense. It is among the holiest days of the year to followers of Christ, for it commemorates the day that Christ laid down his life on our behalf. As it is, I guess we are stuck with the name Good Friday. And we could rightfully call it that if we remembered that by the providence of God, it turned out to be the best possible Friday, because in a way that we don't understand, Christ took upon himself the sins of the world. Good Friday is a day we look at the cross and say with gratitude, he died for me. We as Christians know the darkness of Friday, but we also know that Sunday's coming. To complete our celebration, we would ask that we focus on the words of John in his gospel. And this is what he said. Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark. In other words, she came to the tomb before daybreak. That's what we did this morning. We came before daybreak to celebrate this day. John was just reporting these facts, and yet there is another way these words might be interpreted. After all, the writers of the New Testament, as well as Jesus himself, often used imagery of darkness and light to signify something else. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. Darkness could refer to a world without Christ, a world without hope, in a world of sin and death, a world where God's promises had been forgotten and God's people felt forsaken. Darkness is much more than the absence of light. Darkness is a spiritual condition in which the presence of God is no longer felt. But Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. On Friday, her master had been crucified. Nails pierced his hands and feet, a spear thrust to his side, and Mary Magdalene watched him die a horrible death. Afterward, they laid her precious Lord in a borrowed tomb. How could this be? This was a man who had come to redeem Israel. How could this be? She could not understand. Where was God in all of this? The young boy grew up in a military family. His father often told him about the tales of military triumphs. One Sunday in Sunday school, the boy's teacher gave a graphic account of Christ's death on the cross. The boy listened in astonishment. During a pause, the excited young boy shouted, "Well, what I want to know is, where were the Marines?" Mary Magdalene probably wondered the same thing. Where were the Marines? Or where were the 10,000 angels? And where was God? Was there no one to stop the awful miscarriage of justice? The light of Mary's world had been extinguished. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. There's something about darkness. Which is your favorite month, January or April? I know the answer to that. There's an illness that some people suffer that causes them to get depressed in the absence of light. The disease is not all that rare. In fact, Dr. Michael Gitlin, a specialist in this illness, says that many persons who suffer from the so-called winter blahs might benefit from a combination of drug treatment and exposure to light. We're now finding that light may augment the response of antidepressant drugs, says Gitlin. Some people experience depression according to seasonal patterns. These are people who get depressed when the days get shorter. What these folks need, says Dr. Gitlin, is light. While it was dark, still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. That darkness was not physical, it was spiritual as well. Back in 1903, Guy Thornton wrote a book titled When It Is Dark. Subtitled, The book was the story of the Great Conspiracy. It graphically describes moral collapse that would occur if the world were suddenly to discover that the resurrection of Jesus was a hoax. The climax of the novel tells what happened the day after people heard the news that Christ never rose. The results were horrible. Although at the end of the conspiracy, it was exposed and the villain carried off to an asylum. A world without Christ would be dark. It would be a dark world indeed. Imagine our nation without Christian hospitals, all of them closed, without Christian universities, without Christian shelters for the homeless. Imagine people with no basis for moral decision making, families who never prayed together. Imagine a world without Handel's Messiah, a world without altars in which to marry our young and bury our old. Imagine a society with no sense of spiritual purpose or undergirding. Of course, some of you may agree that we already have a society like that. How sad. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. Have you ever come to the tomb of someone you love while it's still dark? Sooner or later, all of us do. The composer, Giuseppe Verdi, knew about darkness. You can see it in his operas. For example, in one of the operas, the court jester mourns the death of his beloved wife. And another opera, Verdi describes a dying heroine vowing that she would look after her dear Alfredo from heaven. Verdi himself had walked the dark corridors of bereavement in his mid-20s, 3 years in succession. First, he lost his infant son. Then he lost his infant daughter. And finally, he lost his devoted wife. The father-child relationship comes up often in Verdi's operas, perhaps because their composer never got over the loss of his own children. Verdi would eventually marry again, but he was never again blessed with children. In his art, the opera, Verdi confronted the problem of a final separation from dear ones with prayer. A number of his operas concluded with a prayer of reconciliation and personal reunion beyond the rapture of death. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. It was dark outside and it was dark inside. Some of you have been there. But fortunately, that's not the end of the story, nor is it the end of your story. When Mary reached the tomb, she found the stone rolled away and the body gone, vanished. The tomb empty. What was going on here? She may have wondered that. What's going on? What have they done with him? There is somewhat humorous story that happened to a fellow by the name of Robert Rankin. While he was a student at the Junior College of Mason City, Iowa, Rankin aspired to a theatrical career. He was only a stagehand with a one-line acting part. But it was a time of glory for this little troupe. And they won this regional contest and moved on to the finals at the University of Iowa. in Iowa City. When they got there, they encountered two unexpected problems. The timing of the trip made it impossible for them to have a dress rehearsal. And the second problem was that the stage assigned to them was smaller than the one which they had been accustomed to and had rehearsed and performed. In addition to his work as stagehand, Rankin was to play a policeman.
Don't bother.
His part was confined to one line question. The action proceeded on the stage, including the murder scene, which prompted the call for the police. Now was Rankin's turn. He rushed in on his cue, but unfortunately, because the smaller stage, he stumbled over the corpse and fell flat on his face. He arose with such dignity as he could muster, and ignoring the corpse over which he had just fallen, he delivered his one line. "Where's the body?" That's what Mary said. "Where's the body?" Mary Magdalene wondered, and fear gripped her soul. Had his enemy stolen the body? Mary rushed to find the disciples, and when they confirmed her discovery, she was all that more confused. She stood outside the tomb, weeping. As she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb and saw two angels in white, sitting one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she said this, she turned around and beheld Jesus standing there, but she did not recognize him. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Mary, supposing him to be a gardener, said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And then it happened. Jesus spoke her name, Mary. Mary Magdalene turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And she rushed forward to hold him in her arms. And Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brethren." This is the first time that Jesus called his followers brethren. He had called them slaves and he had called them friends. But now he called them brethren. And he told her, "Say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene did as she was told. She announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." That, of course, is the rest of the story. Christ, who was dead, is now alive. Mary Magdalene had come to the tomb while it was still dark. But now the sun was risen. Isn't that the message of Easter when you come down to it? In the midst of our darkness, the sun always rises. There is hope. There is promise. The Son of God has risen. We're told that if you're very alert as you walk through the great old city of Edinburgh, Scotland, you'll notice a tiny alleyway, an alleyway wide enough for two people to pass. Over the header of the entrance of this alleyway is a carving of a boy's face, now dimmed by years of weather, and there was a message as well. And the message said, "Heave away, chaps. I'm not dead yet." The face is a message. In the message was carved in honor of something that happened a long time ago at that spot. An accident buried a number of persons under rubble of a fallen building. For hours, men struggled to dig through the bricks and the dirt to see if there were any survivors. At last, they concluded that their effort was hopeless, so they would give up the search. At that point, a buried Scottish lad summoned the energy to call out his message. "Heave away, chaps. I'm not dead yet." That is the message that comes bringing light into our darkened world. Heave away, chaps. I'm not dead yet. It is a message of hope, a message of healing, and a message of promise. It's like the lesson that psychologist Lee Salk learned from his mother, Dora. As a young girl in Russia, Salk's mother was driven from her home by the Cossacks, who burned their entire village to the ground. She fled for her life, hiding in hay wagons and huddling in ditches. Eventually, she crossed the sea to America, crowded in a ship's hold. She was about 12 years old when she arrived in New York City in 1901. Immediately, she went to work 16 hours a day in a sweatshop. She tried to go to school at night, but kept falling asleep over her books. Yet she never lost hope. Even after she married and had 3 sons, there was still hard times, but she would not allow her family to give up. She urged Lee and his brothers to think about what they had, not what they didn't have. She taught them that in hardship, you develop a capacity to appreciate beauty that exists in the simplest elements of life. The attitude that she conveyed to Lee Salk was this: when it gets dark enough, you can see the stars. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb when it was still dark, but the darkness will soon be overcome by the light. And maybe that's the message we need to hear today. Perhaps for whatever reason, you're in darkness. Family concerns, problems at work, anxiety about your health and your future, the loss of someone you love. Easter promises us more than the stars in our darkness. Easter promises that in the midst of our deepest darkness, the sun rises to overwhelm the darkness forever. Victor Hugo once put it like this: for a half century, I've been writing my thoughts in prose and verse and history and philosophy, but I feel I have not said 1/10 of what is in me. When I go down to the grave, I can say I have finished my day's work, but I cannot say I have finished my life. My day's work will begin again the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley, it's a thoroughfare. It closes on the twilight and opens on the dawn. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb while it was still dark. Darkness did not remain. The dawn broke. God's Son and the Son had risen. And all God's people said, Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Gary.